there need to be more people at college universities saying no. On a moral standpoint, this guy is a terrible human being to be the leader of young men. And if you're going to cover up more of his bad humaning and bad leadership, because there is nobody who can tell me Urban Meyer is fit to lead young men. He is fit to win football games. That's fine. But if that's your only objective as a college football program, then you need to take the tag of amateurism off and pay the damn kids. Because if that's all you're worried about, when you go into those homes and you continue to say, well, we're offering you a free education and we're going to help mold the minds of these young men and we're going to help make them the leaders of the next generation, you're fucking lying when you allow a guy like Urban Meyer, human trash, to run your program.
The only thing that scares me about him is he loves hunting, which means he has guns, and eventually he's going to wind up snapping too.
No, see, you're wrong. He's not the kind of personality snap. You know why? Doesn't care. He honestly doesn't seem to care about anything. He doesn't care about winning football games. He doesn't care about feeding goldfish.
Oh.
By the way, fuck you, John Elway. So now you're just talking out your ass. Sorry, Elway. Get the fuck over yourself. You can go suck your MAGA owner's ass, just like all those other MAGA owners in the NFL, and fucking jerk off into a corner and be like, oh, these guys should be daily for the anthem. Oh, I can't believe they did it again. Get out of here. Thanks once again for tuning in to Off Base Sports Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Jason Benicki Critchlow. And please subscribe, rate, review, and share with your friends. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. And I will keep doing better at sharing more content on those platforms. I'm going to get right into it this Wednesday. I guess it's Thursday now. Why did I try to say Wednesday? But it's Thursday, November the 1st. And I'm going to start right off the bat with talking about Derrick Rose's 50-point game last night. I think anybody who listens to this podcast with any regularity knows that I am a Chicago Bulls fan. And, Bulls fans have had this kind of love-hate thing with Derrick Rose over the years because he was such a great player for us, Comes in, he wins Rookie of the Year, turns the franchise around from, lottery team to lowly contender to number 1 overall seed and wins the MVP. And then the next year in that strike-shortened season, he has that most fateful of ACL injuries that I still to this day fully blame on Tom Thibodeau for leaving his starters in a classic Tom Thibodeau move with, a minute to go and up 11. He's playing his starters like the game's still on the line, and then Derrick Rose pops his ACL, and the Bulls lose a series, and then they lose Derrick Rose for the next year. And then when he comes back after a full year's rehab, then, 10, 12 games in, he tears his meniscus. And from there on, it's just a chronic series of injuries for Derrick Rose, and it's one of those things that's always going to be, a Penny Hardaway-esque what could have been situation until last night. And, with Jeff Teague out for injury and Jimmy Butler hurt and taking the day off just due to some ongoing nagging things, Derrick Rose gets to start and gets to play vintage throwback Derrick Rose and scores 50 points on like 20 shots or something. He was accurate from deep. He was accurate from the field. He was getting to the line and then makes the game-winning block to end the game as well. And, of course, he has kind of an emotional moment afterwards, before he goes talks to the press and everything. And if there's anybody on earth who deserves it, it's Derrick Rose. To go through what he's been through and to go through all the media scrutiny of, does he really want to play? Does he really care? Is he just out there, does he want to fight through all these injuries? Is he soft? I would say anybody who's been through the amount of knee surgeries he's been through and continued to play and continues to come back is not soft and should not be questioned for his heart. And he's made hundreds of millions of dollars at this point. If he wanted to walk away, he could walk away and be just fine. And of course, I feel like I wouldn't be doing any service, but it was an emotional thing for me as a Bulls fan. We in America, we love our comeback stories and we love our feel good moments, and I feel like last night for Derrick Rose, even if it's just a one-off, gave us that. There's still something in there. He can still be, again, not as great as he want, not as he's as great as he want. I'm as great as I once was, but not Anyways, everybody knows the saying. I'm not as great as I once was, but I can be great once. I don't know. I'm really drawing a blank, and I know the saying. God damn it. It's going to piss me off that I've wasted some of your time with that. But anyways, he had, even if it's just a one-off night, there's nobody more who deserves that. And the only thing that's been disappointing to me about it has been kind of the media coverage post, the immediate reaction of, this is great. The players who supported him through great Twitter comments. And then you get the, ringer, well, what's the proper context for this? You know what, as a sports fan, I don't need a context for this. We don't need a context. You know what? We'll worry about context after the next game, or the game after that, or the game after that. But for today, this is what being a sports fan is about. Let us enjoy this moment. Quit trying to put it in context. Quit trying to frame it. Quit worrying about your content and your clicks and everything else. And let us enjoy the moment. Let us soak it in. And if he never has another game like this, kudos. If he starts to play better and becomes a more efficient, better scoring version of himself this late in his career at 30, then we'll enjoy that too. But let us cross those bridges when we get there. We don't have to try to connect dots forward. You can't. You can never connect all the dots going forward. All you can do is connect them going backwards. You just have to keep working forward and hope that by the time you get where you need to go, the dots have connected themselves. So when they try to say, let's put this in context, or bring up that nasty issue that he had to deal with in LA that he was found not liable for because it was a civil issue, which means it had a lower burden of proof than a criminal case. And then he didn't... So he's found not liable, and you have to dig that up. So they found that even by a preponderance of the evidence, he wasn't responsible for what happened. And that's what you're talking about during this? Like, let the man have his moment. Let him enjoy it. He's been through hell and back, on and off the court. Let him have this moment without having to hear about that or the injuries. Just, hey, great game, Derrick Rose. It was great to see you play like we all know you were capable of once, and we're glad to see that you can do it again. And hopefully it's the start of something better. Maybe it's not. But I think that's really all I'm going to say about that. And I'm going to move over right to the Bulls. And I'm sure there are a few people out there after all the offseason trash I talked about Zach LaVine who are like, well, see, look how great he's playing. He's scoring all these points. Shouldn't you be happy for $18 million that you have a guy who could score 20-something a night? Not when he's giving up 30-something a night. Not when they're not winning. Zach LaVine is playing high volume, high usage, high scoring basketball that we all know is not winning basketball. The statistics have borne out time and time again that this is not how you win basketball games. You don't have one player take a bulk of your shots. And again, what happens when Lauri Markkanen comes back? What happens when Chris Dunn is back? And now he's not the lead ball handler. And he's still a sieve defensively. He's going to continue to be that guy, and he's not going to be as efficient offensively, and he's going to have less touches, and he's going to have a lower usage rate, and now he's not going to be scoring. So again, I don't care about what his point output is when he's giving up more than he's scoring. Doesn't matter. Wins and losses, all that matter, particularly at that dollar amount. But that's the problem, is in the analytic world that some people misinterpret it. Well, see, he's scoring all these points. And his PER's this, or his game score is that. I don't care. Are you or are you not helping your team win basketball games? And right now, he's not doing the things to help his team win basketball games. He doesn't show any inclination to become the player that's going to do things that will help a team win basketball games. And Wendell Carter's finally had 2 good games, but he's looked like trash out of his element most of the season. And then it's like, well, he played a bad defensive team and he scored a lot of points. Look how good he is. Like, no, he played a really bad defensive team, scored a lot of points. Again, somebody has to score eventually. But on the other hand, when you still only score, 106 in overtime, you're not doing well. I mean, you have 3 scores total on the roster. Well, 4 if you count the instant offense man off the bench. But, there's not a lot of guys demanding touches right now. It's going to be random and I apologize for that. Who gets the shots and who they're playing and how they match up defensively. That's going to be the actual key to this. But no, I'm not impressed by what Zach LaVine's done. I still see it as a waste of money. I still think that Garpax need to be fired, that they're not going to build a long-term winner in Chicago. They have no idea how to do it. If if this were a matter of life and death, they would have already been dead. They're not competent enough to tear down all the way. Now they've got Robin Lopez and Justin Holiday, who they refused to trade last year when people were willing to give them assets for him, just sitting on the bench, not playing at all, losing even more trade value. Like, there's no vision. There's no plan. There's no end in sight, and it's just going to be another mediocre product that may eke into a 8 seed someday, but that doesn't have the star pieces to be a championship level team. And that should always be the goal, to compete for championships. You can't win them, but you have to compete for them. And this team is not good enough. Not now, not if they all hit their ceilings as players. Is it good enough to be a championship caliber team? So the tank should still be on, but that's not how they're going to try and run this out. Luckily, they're just bad enough that it'll tank inadvertently. And that will be it for this team. I don't see much. I've enjoyed early season basketball. But I again, what do I see that makes me question the efficacy of Gar Pax as a GM and president of basketball operations leader? I see Nikola Mirotic being exactly who every Bulls fan thought he could be over in Europe. Stretch 4, good second complement scorer, gives you plenty of floor spacing, gives you a versatile offense, can get you some rebounds. Hey, isn't that exactly who you drafted him to be? And then you couldn't see it and trust in him. Instead, you kept hanging on to Taj Gibson. And, well, he's a grinder and his work ethic and da-da-da. And then, well, we don't trust him to be a Sega fiddle, so we're going to go out and sign Rajon Rondo and Dwayne Wade over the hill version to complement Jimmy Butler. And it's like, we didn't have to go through this rebuild. We could have had Jimmy Butler and Nikola Mirotic and a couple extra pieces around them, and not even get into the trade for Doug McDermott that really set us behind, because then you could have had Gary Harris and Yusuf Nurkic right around him, and suddenly, holy cow, you have a really competent squad that's competitive in the East. And then you just have to add a piece here and a piece there, and you're right there. But nope, Gar Pax can't see what they've already accomplished, so is what it is, I guess. But again, I'm going to continue loudly and proudly to beat the drum that it is time for the Reinsdorf family to do every Bulls fan a favor and fire Gar Pax. Please, for the love of God, I could get you one of those chickens that just pecks at a board to do a better job building a team for long-term competency than Gar Forman and John Paxson have at this point. If they would have never lucked into Derrick Rose, they'd have never even have been a team that could have been around. But it is what it is, I guess, at this point. Us Bulls fans are stuck with it. We're never going to see the competency of the Celtics organization, where they have Danny Ainge and Brad Stevens, who are two of the best at what they do, and they're doing it way more with way less than what the Bulls have at their disposal in terms of overall assets and resources. Shouldn't say that. I mean, yeah, total assets, yeah, the Bulls have more assets, not just NBA draft assets or NBA player assets. They actually have more dollar assets than the Celtics franchise does at their disposal with the Reinsdorf family and all their banked up cash over the years. But again, you see a team that struck the right chord between veteran and youth, who was able to find a way to spin their veterans for future assets that were valuable, not just, well, this is the best we can get and we're just going to settle, or we're going to panic and make a trade a little too early because we don't want to pay him what he's worth. We don't want to pay Jimmy Butler $30 million, but we also don't want to make sure we get future draft picks. We just want to, there was zero reason for that trade to involve Zach LaVine and Chris Dunn, Chris Dunn, again, is hurt. And Cameron Payne, don't even make me get started on Cameron Payne. But again, that is the incompetency, as opposed to, hey, we'll sell you Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce for multiple draft picks spread out over the years. Absolutely, some pick swaps too. Well, we got to have those. And now all of a sudden you're able to add a Jason Tatum, who's going to be a franchise player. You have the assets to trade for a Kyrie Irving, who's going to be who is a franchise player. You had Al Horford, who is a perfect third person. You're able to make sure you keep your books clean so you can add a Gordon Haywood. You have a Jaylen Brown who's probably a perfect third player, but now gets to be your fifth player and also gives you now 3 wings who can switch, any which way from the 2, 3, and 4 and be the perfect wings for scoring and defense in the modern NBA. Holy cow. And then you can add some more late round flyers on guys, and if some of those pan out, then you really have hit. And then you have some of your own guys develop. Holy cow. That's how a rebuild looks, but you can't expect it to take place in 1 year like the Bulls continue to think. So, we'll compete for the playoffs this year. Why? You don't have a team that is championship caliber. You're missing so much wing piece. That is not even funny to compete in the modern NBA. So why try to compete sooner than you have to? You can say what you want about the process for the Sixers, but they are not the team they are today without it. If they would have tried to rush their rebuild and do it in 1 year or 2 years, there is zero chance that they are a competent NBA franchise right now, that they're competing for one of the top 4 seeds, that they're going to make another run at the Eastern Conference Finals, that they're going to have a chance to play for championships very soon. But they've been able to, again, use their picks, use extra picks they've acquired, keep themselves, with salary cap space available to add pieces around it, and voila, there they are. But the Bulls don't see it. But again, early season has been great to watch teams like the Pelicans. It's been great to watch the Raptors be out there and do what they do. See Kawhi Leonard bounce back. And the Spurs have looked really good. So I still don't feel like many of my early season predictions are off. I don't feel like I've missed anything. The Lakers are looking a little rocky to start, but they're starting to smooth out, so I think they'll be okay going forward. And it's been an enjoyable early season, to say the least. I don't think I want to talk too much basketball because it's still only 8 to 10 games in, so you still have small sample size issues going on. But I did want to get an episode recorded today. And I think the last thing I'm going to talk about, because I'm going to keep this one short and sweet since it's just me, is the UFC media right now is driving me insane with a narrative that you're getting tweeted out, with Dana White passing this narrative along because he's selling wolf tickets again like he's always done, and eating up Dustin Poirier's story about what happened at UFC 230 like it's the truth. I want to take a minute to remind everybody about something when they start trying to blame Nate Diaz for not being at UFC 230 this week. He's not the one who withdrew due to an existing injury that he had his previous 2 fights, like Dustin Poirier claimed, and that he knew he needed to either get treatment or fight through it, and he decided not to this time. So Dustin Poirier is the one who is not fighting at UFC 230 because he withdrew, not Nate Diaz. And this concept, Nate Diaz over-negotiated or overplayed his hand. No, he didn't. And some of these UFC fighters need to start understanding that. He didn't over-negotiate. He didn't overplay his hand. He said, I'm not fighting 5 fights rounds in the main event unless I'm being compensated correctly. If I'm not going to be if you want me to be the main event, you want me to be the headliner, I need to compensate it like such. Otherwise, I'm not going to. And again, Dustin Poirier is just looking for excuses to deflect from the fact that he's the one withdrew with an existing injury that he already had, and not a new injury, nothing new. He just suddenly decided, you know what, after 2 fights, I can't do this again. Well, you're the one who pulled out. You're the reason this fight isn't happening, not Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz was ready to go. He's still training right now, ready to go if need be arises. But I just get tired of this media story that, oh, hey, guess what? We need somebody who can to blame for this, and we need to make sure that Dustin Poirier, somebody we like, doesn't take all the heat. So we'll get people like Ariel Helwani and that such to make Nate Diaz the fall guy, and make it, have people run articles like, are fans turning on Nate Diaz? No, real fans are not. Real fans saw Nate Diaz training and ready to go and ready to be the co-main event like he was signed to be. And they saw Dustin Poirier. Once again, Dustin Poirier is the one who pulled out of the fight. Now, should Nate Diaz be training for a fight at 155, and with 3 weeks to go, now take a fighter who's been training to fight at 170 at 170? No, that's ridiculous. This isn't the same concept of, well, Nate Diaz is got 8 days to get ready for a fight and is just asking that Conor McGregor not cut weight with him. They're both 155 fighters normally, and they both just decided, let's not cut. Diaz is like, I'm at such a late start, I can't cut to 155. How about we just call it a 170 and neither of us cut weight, because they were 167 and 166 when they weighed in. So neither one really cut weight because they weren't even close to 170. But again, what it did was just kind of put them on even footing. It's not this big, oh, he's fighting up 2 weight classes like people tried to make Conor McGregor sound when he lost. No, he wasn't. He was just fighting in his walking around weight, same way Nate Diaz was. Same reason that Nate Diaz has typically struggled at welterweight, because he typically walks around in 167, 168, and has to bulk up to get to 170. Now, don't get me wrong. He was looking very cut in all those training fight photos for this fight. So, I mean, could he have been closer to 175? Maybe. But again, he was prepping for a fight at 155. He would have already been in the cut down process to get him so he could make the weight of 155, 156 technically, because you get a pound if it's a non-main event. And now you're asking him to turn completely around and fight at 170. And he even said, hey, shout out to Jorge Masvidal for being ready to step up. And again, we don't know if he was even offered that fight. Once Poirier pulled out, from what it sounds like, from Dana White's own mouth, he didn't offer Nate Diaz another fight. He pulled him from the card on his own decision and said, well, I'll make a fight for Diaz when he's ready to fight. Aren't you in the business of making money? Shouldn't you be trying to put together every fight you can for him so you can find a fight that makes enough money for him and enough money for you? Because that's what this is. Like, to pretend that he should just take any fight that's in front of him, that is preposterous. And I know there are guys like Chael Sonnen who say you should be ready to fight at any time, at any weight, on any day, for any amount of money. That's just wrong. This is still business. These guys are still trying to make money. And again, if anybody knows as much as anybody, Chael Sonnen understands there's a limited window for you to make this money. You have got to go get it. You've got to make sure you maximize what you get, and you don't maximize what you get by just showing up every time they offer you a fight and taking whatever is offered to you. It doesn't work, doesn't maximize your dollars, and it doesn't win. So I just want to remind everybody, as you're out there and as you're riding around listening to this or listening to it on your treadmill or wherever you're at, that Nate Diaz was ready to fight. That despite all of the narrative out there, that he was ready to go. He's not the one who withdrew. It was Dustin fucking Poirier. So don't be adding Nate Diaz about not fighting this week. Don't be replying to comments about Nate Diaz not fighting for 2 years. Again, remember, he was in a lawsuit with his management team. He could not fight unless he would have to pay them. He might risk paying them even more money in a lawsuit. Why on earth would you fight and not know if you are going to make a dime? That is the most irrational thought process in the history of the world from Dana White, and all of these people are like, well, he hasn't fought in a couple years, so I don't understand why he won't, what's going on. We know the answer. He was in a lawsuit with his management team. It got dismissed in Texas and had the potential to be refiled in a different jurisdiction. Then it finally got settled, but it was not able to be settled until it got dismissed in Texas. Because, again, the management team was figuring, oh, hey, here comes a potential $10 million lawsuit. Why should we settle for a couple $100,000? Well, now that once it got kicked out, then it made it easier for them to say, it's time to settle. But, again, we always hear why Conor McGregor can't do shit or why all these other fighters can't do shit. But for Nate Diaz and Nick Diaz, there's always just, they just don't want to do it. They don't want to do it. No, there was a valid, rational reason, a significant financial reason for Nate Diaz to not fight, and a significant legal issue that could have caused him more difficulty if he would have fought while that lawsuit was pending. But they didn't want to talk about that because it's easier to say, well, he hasn't fought in 2 years and he's just turning down fights left and right, than tell you the truth. Dana White and Dustin Poirier are in the business of selling you wolf tickets. That's what they want to do. That's what they're going to continue to do, is just say, oh, well, you know, he over-negotiated and he didn't seem to really want to fight. He signed a contract. He was training constantly. He was ready to go. He just wasn't going to fight a main event for, you know, on the card money. Like, that makes sense. That makes business sense. If more UFC fighters were willing to say, I'm not just going to take the main event to say I was a main event, but I'm going to do it at co-main or just on the card money, then maybe everybody would make more money. What is it? You know, the UFC fighters are making 20-ish% of the pay-per-view money or the purse or whatever it is. They're not making a significant share of the revenue. It is WME, you know, or William Morris Agency that's making the bulk of the money. You know, it's Zuffa, however you want to, you know, that was making the bulk of the money. They face the same issue that the WNBA does. For some reason, even though we're a nation of workers and we should always have our own workers back, there's always this thing in sports for some reason where people want to blame the people making the money, the athletes, instead of the people actually making the most of them for what happens, which is the owners. So you've heard all, you know, there's plenty of talk about what the UFC fighters are making, and then there's also this talk about been a huge push narrative where WNBA players talk about wanting to be paid fairly and be paid similarly to what men make. And everybody interprets that to mean that they think they're entitled to $200+ million contracts. That's not what the WNBA players are talking about. But what they are talking about is they want a similar share of the revenue. Right now, WNBA players make 22% share of the revenue that the WNBA takes in. NBA players make 50% of that revenue. So we were talking about a 28% difference that the owners of the WNBA teams get to keep. That is a big difference. Now, it's still not nearly the total amount of dollars, and they understand that. Trust me, nobody's saying that that a minimum WNBA contract should be, was it $2.1 million that the NBA veteran minimum is this year? Nobody's making that claim. What they're saying they want is their fair share. That they are just the same as in the men's league. They are equal partners. And that they want to be treated like equal partners because they are the product on the court that's making the TV revenue, that are selling the tickets, that are selling the jerseys, that are selling the sodas and popcorns and hot dogs and everything else, and that they want their 50% of that revenue just the same as the men get. And it's not a big ask. But somehow in sports, owners always get to the fans and convince them, well, see, if we raise their salaries, then we got to raise ticket prices. But not really. Like, there are other expenses to be cut. And again, you're still going to have a large percentage of the revenue to pay all your bills with. If you can't afford to pay your bills with still 50% of the revenue, then maybe you need to look at the rest of your business model and find a way to be more efficient. Because there are very few things where, 50%, your labor cost is 50%, and then the rest of the 50% it goes for paying, for your overhead, et cetera, et cetera. Because that 50% for your labor cost is also your product. So that means your markup is 50%. There, not many businesses get a 50% profit margin all across the board after they pay for their product and their labor costs. They have to, now I know there's still additional labor costs, but again, we've been hoodwinked every time these conversations come up. Whether it's baseball player salaries or basketball players, we talk about the obscene amounts of money we make. And then when the WNBA players say they want to be paid, everybody just scoffs. Like, oh, you're not going to be paid what the NBA players want. They don't want the same dollar for dollars. They want that same 50% of the revenue. And it's not a big ask, and it's something that we should all demand. And it's especially hilarious to me that people then try to disparage, well, it's not as compelling of a product, blah, 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 will be the same people who complain about the WNBA. All these guys do is dribble and carry and travel and dunk, and they just don't play the game the way it's meant to be played. Guess who doesn't travel, who doesn't dunk, who does pass, who does use motion, who does use the mid-range jumper and the bake shot and makes their free throws and plays the game in the classical men's sense? Women's basketball. If you want to go see old school, hard-nosed, fundamentally sound basketball, go watch the WNBA. You're going to find a lot of it there. And you're still going to find plenty of athleticism and plenty of exciting basketball. But you choose not to tune in and not watch because of your own biases. And you just want to complain for the sake of complaining. So, the same thing I say about the WNBA, let them have their revenue, is the same thing I say about Nate Diaz and the UFC. Let the fighters have their revenue, let the fighters have their sponsorships. And remember, for the love of God, if Dustin Poirier does another interview this week where he talks about Nate Diaz, Nate was ready to fight. You weren't. You're the one who pulled out with an injury that you had for your last 2 fights and somehow could fight through, but now you can't. So go sell those wolf tickets elsewhere. And until next time, I was Jason Benicki Critchlow. This is the Off Base Sports Podcast. Please subscribe, rate, review, and tell your friends. Have a good one.